Hello everybody, welcome to ACCT210. In this video, we will talk about chapter 4, the ABC costing. We don't talk about the other two, so our focus is just the first part. Chapter 4 is very similar with the chapter 3. We are still continuing the topic of manufacturing overhead allocation, right? So what we have learned in chapter 3 are just for this, here, we have learned that the flow of the cost is you have the raw material, right? You purchase your raw material, you put in your warehouse, and then when you use your raw material, it will go to work in process. So you will have work in process raw material, you will have work in process, and then direct labor. We know you also have the manufacturing overhead, but at that moment, we cannot decide the specific amount of the manufacturing overhead because it's indirect, you cannot trace it. So all you can do is you have to allocate. So we put the manufacturing overhead just here, we talk about how do we allocate. And once we finish it, it became our finished goods. It is a part of our inventory. And when we sell them, so all of these, they are our inventory of the balance sheet, right? So when we sell them, they became a cost of goods sold in the income statement. Okay, so that's the main part. We said, hey, how do we find out all the costs? So next question is, how do we allocate our manufacturing overhead? You said, oh, I cannot know the specific amount. So I have to wait until the end of the job. I know, hey, I use direct labor, direct material, or whatever. Then based on that, I can allocate my manufacturing overhead. So instead of using the actual manufacturing overhead, we don't really know the actual number. You cannot decide, let's say for the utility, you really don't know how many dollars really went to this specific job. So instead of using the accurate manufacturing overhead for that specific job, we allocate portion of your total manufacturing overhead to that specific job. Okay, so next question became, how do we get our allocated manufacturing overhead, right? How do we allocate it? We said, how do you allocate it? Basically two steps. So first is you need to get your allocation rate. So it's your estimated overall manufacturing overhead divided by your estimated the cost driver, no matter it's direct labor, direct machine hour, whatever. Whatever question test tells you, you just use that one as the cost driver. And once we get the rate, we use that rate to time our actual cost driver related with that job. We said, hey, you are making this red pen, right? So you got the estimated rate for the whole company, for the whole plant wide. And then we said, okay, for this specific job, for this specific red pen, it costs, like I say, two direct labor hours to make this red pen. So we use that rate to time these specific jobs 2 hours to get our allocated manufacturing overhead. And what we do is, how do we allocate for the journal entry is make sure you decide the actual manufacturing overhead and then the allocated manufacturing overhead, right? Make sure you know the two different things. So this is your manufacturing overhead account, let's say. Your actual is just when you pay the bills, when you incur all the manufacturing overhead costs. indirect labor, indirect material, and then all the tax, depreciation, insurance, those things. So it's kind of like a swimming pool. You just store all of this actual manufacturing overhead. And when you allocate to this job, you get a cup of water from your actual and put in the allocated part. For the next job, you got a cup of water. For that job, you got a cup of water. For that job, you got a cup of water. For that job, you got a cup of water, let's say. So let's say your total actual, you paid $100 on the insurance. You get $10 for that job, you know, you get $20 for that job, you got $15 for that job, you got $12 for that job, you got I don't know, $18 for that job. So total is how much? So 30, 50, 60, 75. So you only allocated 75. Your actual is 100, you only allocated 75. So you under allocated your total manufacturing overhead cost to all of the jobs. So you have to adjust. You want this to be zero balance. So you have to credit the extra $25 and increase your cost of goods sold 25, and then also allocate more of the manufacturing overhead 25. Okay, so this is just the general flow of our manufacturing overhead allocation, and then how all the costs go from the beginning to the end. So you will say, hey, what is the difference of chapter 3 and chapter 4 if they both talk about manufacturing overhead allocation? The main difference is we think, remember we said, hey, for chapter 3, we said you just got one rate, right? No matter you make this red pen or yellow pen or this green pen, you said you don't care, you just use $3, $2 per direct labor hours. So it's the same. But we said that's not really accurate, especially if you make different jobs, right? So maybe you make the pen, it's different from making this notebook, let's say. So if you use the same rate, it's not accurate. So you may want to have, you know, a different department, like for the pen department, you will use more of the ink department. I just make up, right? For the notebook, you may have more costs related with the, you know, like a cutting department. So you want to have a more accurate rate. Therefore, your manufacturing overhead allocation will be, you know, more accurate, closer to your actual. So that's what we have been doing in chapter 4, is we want to find a more accurate allocation method. So the first one we talk about is we use departmental overhead rate instead of chapter 3, the plant-wide rate. We talk about cost distortion. I'm not going to really read, but you just need to know the main idea is for each department you have one rate. Also know it's not like saying, hey, departmental rate is required for all of the situations. You know, there are two specific reasons why you want to use departmental. Is first is different departments have a different amount and types of manufacturing overhead. And then different products, they also use a different department to different extent. So if you have that two reasons, it's maybe just tells you, hey, think about department rate instead of the plant-wide rate, okay? So I'm not going to read from the textbook, you know, they just illustrated, instead of using the plant-wide, it's 160, but if you use the departmental overhead, it's more accurate. So it's 140, it's 200. So you have this cost distortion. But then we said that's not the end. We want to be more accurate. And then we said, hey, instead of using department, maybe we should think about each different level of activity. So we have this called the ABC costing. I hope you, at least from chapter 4, you should know there is a keyword called ABC costing, activity-based costing method. we still want to allocate our indirect cost, allocate indirect cost, which means we just allocate our manufacturing overhead. Okay. So many different things you want to know. First is there are different activities in the plant. You know, you have a setup, you have handling, you have cutting, supervising, you know, inspecting, and then packing, different level. So the second thing you want also to know, I'll skip that one, we go back when we do problems. Also make sure there are different cost hierarchy. So the basic one is unit level, it goes with each unit. If you have more unit, you have more cost. Second is batch level, is related with a batch, you know. One very typical example is machine setup. When you set up a machine, you can make 10 pencils, you know. Third one is a product level. You lease a specific equipment for one specific product, then that will product level. Highest level is a facility level, so no matter, you know, how many units, batch or whatever, like a facility insurance, a facility whatever, so that is a facility level. So make sure you know these 4 levels. And then here is the specific example for each level. Okay. What else? Okay, the next thing in our PowerPoint, we also talk about some examples, right? Some examples. This is from your active duty. So what I'm trying to tell you, what we want to share is that from chapter 3 and chapter 4, we are focusing you on the allocation. Remember, your allocation is just how do you divide the pie. So allocation, no matter how do you allocate it, your actual pie is still this big. Okay, the keyword is your pie is this big. You allocate it to half and half, you allocate it to quarter and quarter, or you allocate to 6 pieces, 8 pieces. That's okay, but your actual, no matter how do you allocate, the actual is always that. So that is the reason in this question we said no matter how do you allocate, your actual is still the same. And then our next thing is what's the bad thing about your allocation? So no matter how hard you try to allocate your manufacturing overhead accurate, there are still some really bad things. First thing is some managers, they try to, you know, incur less of the manufacturing overhead based on the allocation criteria. So if their bonus is based on the times they place order, so they may place less order, they may combine order, even though, you know, the quality may not be that good. So there are just different unintended consequences, and then like all of these choices, they are the examples. Also, the next page is talking about another situation is we said allocation, as I keep saying, is just a way you divide the pie. It doesn't mean that you will lose the actual $10, you will really pay actual $20. Your actual is still the same. So even you do this, do that, you will not really lose or save the actual money. But if enough people they do that in the long term, you know, you can save money by having a more accurate allocation method. Okay, so the second part, this is the first important part of chapter 4, just some concept background. And then the next important thing is also in the My Accounting Lab is how do we use ABC costing to do the questions. As I say, it still carries the same idea. You first get the rate, and then for each activity, you have to allocate your manufacturing overhead. Then you add all of your activity, you will get your total manufacturing overhead. So I just show you, I will post solution to these questions, but I want to show you very briefly about one practice, So the first thing is that calculate your each rate and then calculate total cost or whatever. So first thing is you want to get a rate. We said there are 5 level, there are 5 different, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 different activities for this job. So to finish the job, you need to set up the machine, you need to machining, you need to polishing, you need to quality control. You also need related with some facility level cost. So all those 5 activities are necessary to finish that specific job. And then for machine setup, I just use this one. You totally will have 120,000 related with your machine setup, and then you need 2,000 machine setup. So for each time you set up a machine, you have to allocate $60. And then every time when you have a machine hour, you have to allocate $175. So you have these 5 different rates, right? Instead of just the one plant-wide rate, you have 5 different rates related with 5 different activities. Second one, I'll ask you about total cost. We said total cost is your direct labor, direct material, and the manufacturing overhead allocation. Direct labor question tells you that $25 per hour, 10 direct labor hours. Direct material question also tells you directly 1,050. And then how do we allocate our manufacturing overhead? We said 5 activities. So question told you that it's 1 machine setup, and then 1 machine is $60. 5 machine hours is 5 times 175. 2 polishing, 1 polishing is 8. 2 polishing is 2 times 8. 2 quality control, 1 quality control is 70. 2 will be 2 times 70. And okay, the tricky part for this question is, remember we have 5 activities, but this part only tells us 4 activities. So we are not done. We have to also think about our facility level activity. Facility level is related with the direct labor hours. For 1 direct labor hour, we need to allocate $2.4. How many actual direct labor hours is 10 hours of direct labor. So we have to time 10 times this 2.4, the rate. So that gives you allocated manufacturing overhead. Then you add your direct labor, you add your direct material, you will get the cost of this job. Okay, the fourth one said, hey, if you do traditional, it just wants to tell you traditional is not accurate, because if based on traditional, it's your total manufacturing estimate overhead divided by total divided by your total direct labor hours, right? 50,000. So you will allocate $33 when you have 1 direct labor hour. Your actual for this job is 10 hours. So based on chapter 3, you will allocate $330,000. Sorry, $330. But when we use more accurate ABC allocation, you found out your total allocation should be $1,115. So you can see this is a big difference. So it kind of tells you, hey, it's not accurate, not at all, almost, right? So we have a cost distortion. Is the difference is 1115 minus 330, so gives me, goodness, am I right? $785, right? So this is our cost distortion. We under allocate that much money. Okay, so that's all about chapter 4. As I say, it carries from chapter 3, so the logic is the same. Just to make sure you are very careful, read textbook at the concept, and then do your multiple choice of the practice, finish your content lab, you should be fine for this chapter. Let me know if you have any question. I see you in the next video. Thank you.